Hello everybody, and welcome back to Certified Collectibles. This is another episode of First Appearance of the Week. This is Wednesday, November 13th, 2024. We'll be giving you all the first appearance in your comic shops today. And this week we got a great lineup for you guys. I think we have 6 first appearances, 4 honorable mentions, so 10 titles all to go through. There's definitely some books in here you guys should pick up for your collection. So let's go ahead and get started for the first appearance of the week ending November 15th, 2024. First up from DC Comics, Batman and Robin number 15. This features the first full appearance of Memento. Now, like we always mention with the DC Comics, it really depends on what DC does with these characters, as to how important these characters are going to be in the future, and how collectible they're going to be in the future. Now, this character Memento, right now, of course, we don't really know anything about this particular character and what DC has planned. If they make this character a big part of the DCU, bring this character across all the storylines or the story arcs, introduce this character into a small screen, big screen project, then this particular issue may have some importance in the future. Now, if this character just stays within this particular title series, this Batman and Robin series, is only here for this particular story arc, then this title is not going to go anywhere. So this here will be a little speculative if you choose to pick it up, because you are specking on DC doing something with this character, making this character popular with fans and collectors, and make collectors want to hold on to this book long term. In our opinion, these DC first appearances are always worth picking up at the cover price. You know, for $3 or $4, you could be sitting on a huge winner. If it goes nowhere, you're out a couple dollars. So in our opinion, this is a great spec. Pick it up for a spec if you can. If you can't, put it in your B-list and take a look at it later on. Next up from DC Comics, Black Lightning number 1. This is the first team appearance of a new Masters of Disaster. Now, this is also the premiere issue of Black Lightning, this title series. I believe this is volume 3. Now, like I just mentioned, it really depends on what DC does with these characters they're introducing in comics as to how important they're going to be in the future. Now, Black Lightning, I don't know if this particular character or this title series has a big collector base, but this issue does feature the first team appearance of this new Masters of Disaster, so it may be worth some consideration. But this one here is definitely going to be speculative if you choose to pick it up. Might be worth doing so for the cover price. Grab this for a spec if you can. If you can't, put in your B-list and take a look at it later on. Next up from Marvel Comics, Conquest 2099 number 3. This features the first appearance of White Widow 2099. Now, we mentioned this before with this Marvel Conquest 2099 series. The characters they're introducing in this series, these are just alternate universe versions of characters that already exist. So it really depends on what Marvel has planned for these new iterations as to how important these particular iterations are going to be. Like we mentioned before in a previous video, Marvel keeps making these iterations, these alternate universe or these alternate reality versions of existing characters. At a certain point, collectors and fans aren't really going to care about these. Unless, of course, Marvel makes a big splash, introduces these characters onto the small screen, big screen, gets collectors interested in them, then, of course, collectors will hold on to these books long term. But otherwise, these are definitely going to be speculative, because you are specking on these being important in the future. Like I said, not all these alternate universe characters are going to be important. There are going to be some, but they're not all going to be collectible. So this one here is going to be a little more speculative, but like we always say, it's typically worth picking up the first appearance in Marvel titles. Marvel Disney is still churning out a lot of media for the small screen, big screen, so if they do introduce this character onto the screen and collectors take an interest, they will race back to the secondary market to pick this book up. So grab this here for a spec if you can. If you can't, put in your B-list and take a look at it later on. Next up from Marvel Comics, Star Wars Ewoks number 2. This features the first appearance of Red Ghost. Now this here will be a little more speculative than some of the other Star Wars titles we mentioned, because this here is the Star Wars Ewoks title series. There is a collector base out there for the Ewoks. People do love those characters, and this is part of the Star Wars universe, so there will be Star Wars collectors that also want to have this first appearance. And like we always mention, Marvel Disney is still churning out a ton of media for the Star Wars franchise, and if they introduce this character into the small screen, big screen, this new Red Ghost character, collectors will race back to try to find the first appearance in these comics. And since this character is actually being introduced into this Ewoks title series, I can't imagine there's going to be a lot of collectors that buy this book off the shelf. So this year will definitely be under-owned, under-collected. So if this Red Ghost character does become big in the future, there won't be a lot of them on the market. That will be a huge price driver. So this one here will be a little more speculative, but in our opinion, it's always worth picking up the first appearance of new characters in these Star Wars titles. So grab this in here for your collection if you can. If you can't, put in your B-list and take a look at it later on. Next up from Marvel Comics, Amazing Spider-Man number 61. This features the first appearance of Centros, scion of Satorok, the god who gives Juggernaut his powers. This also features the debut of the Doom-inspired Spider-Man suit, and this also begins the 8 Deaths of Spider-Man story arc. Like we always mention with the Amazing Spider-Man title series, anytime they introduce a new character in this title series, these are books you definitely want to own at the cover price. Spider-Man, probably the most heavily collected and most popular franchise for Marvel Comics. Whenever they introduce a new character or a new suit, which this particular issue does both, these are books you definitely want to have in your collection. So this is one we do think you should pick up. Go ahead and grab this one. And finally from Image Comics, G.I. Joe number 1. This features the first appearance of Risk. Now this one here is one we do think you should pick up for your collection. You know, G.I. Joe, this franchise has a huge fan base and huge collector base, probably just as popular today as when it first came out, and this here is the premiere issue of this new title series, and this also has a first appearance. This one here has a lot going for it. This is one you don't want to miss out on at the cover price. Go ahead and grab this one. And now for the honorable mentions. From DC Comics, Absolute Batman #2. This features the introduction of Absolute Harvey Dent, Riddler, Selina Kyle, and Penguin. Now this is another one that you should definitely pick up for your collection. You know, this Absolute Batman title series, this has been hugely popular with fans and collectors. You know, Absolute Batman #1, well over $100 in CGC 9.8, and there's been a huge demand for #2. And this issue #2 also introduces all these new Absolute versions of characters, Absolute Harvey Dent, Riddler, Selina Kyle, and Penguin. So this is one we definitely think you should pick up for your collection. Go ahead and grab this one. Next up from Dark Horse, Arcbound #1. This is co-written by Tom Hardy. In a future where a corporation mines what's left of a barren Earth, a high-level soldier gets a message from a mysterious entity that makes him question what it truly means to be human in a world where the boundaries of technology and identity blur. Now, like we mentioned in previous videos, Dark Horse has had a lot of their titles pick up an option for small screen, big screen projects, and the fact that this here issue is co-written by Tom Hardy, this here has great potential to be picked up an option. You know, these small press and indie publishers, we mentioned this before, when these books get optioned, that's a huge price driver. They don't actually have to make it to the screen. Just being optioned alone is enough to kick up the price in the secondary market. And like I said, with the attachment of Tom Hardy to this particular title series, this one here has a little bit more catalyst to get picked up. So this one here will be speculative if you choose to pick it up, because you are specking on this getting picked up an option, getting a lot more eyes on this particular issue, getting collectors raced back to the secondary market to find this book. But in our opinion, great spec. Grab this here for a spec if you can. If you can't, put in your B-list and take a look at it later on. Next up from Mad Cave, String #1. A young woman has the ability to see two types of strings. A blue one which stretches between sexual partners, and a black one that connects murderers and their victims, which suddenly appears connected to her own body. Now, Mad Cave has been getting a lot more attention on their titles. They haven't had a lot of their titles picked up an option in the past, but you know, that's no indication of the future. If this particular title gets picked up an option, makes it to the screen, collectors will race back to try to find this premiere issue. Definitely going to be speculative if you choose to pick it up, but like we always say, with these small press and indie publishers, these are not heavily collected when they hit the shelf. A lot of retailers actually don't carry a lot of these small press publishers, so there's not a lot of them out there. So when they do get a buzz, when they do get some hype, that's a huge price driver. These books do jump in price. So this one here, like I said, definitely speculative if you choose to pick it up. Maybe we're doing so for the cover price. Grab this here for a spec if you can. If you can't, put in your B-list and take a look at it later on. And finally from IDW, Yars Rising #1. Now this here is a prequel to the Atari video game of the same name. Now we always put video game titles on the list, at least the premiere issue of these titles, because they typically perform well as time goes on. You know, a lot of collectors don't pick up these video game titles, and especially this being an Atari video game, I can't imagine there's going to be a lot of collectors and fans picking this book up. But like I said before, when there's fewer of them on the market, and people want them later on, that's definitely a huge price driver. Like I mentioned before, in my opinion, it's always worth picking up these premiere issues of video game titles. So this one here will be a little more speculative if you choose to pick it up, but for the cover price, this might be a great spec. Grab this here for a spec if you can. If you can't, put it in a B-list and take a look at it later on. So there you have the 10 titles we have for you guys this week. There's definitely some books in there you guys should pick up for your collection. So please feel free to drop some comments in the comment section below. Thumbs up if you like this video. And as always, please remember to subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Thank you for joining us here at SpiderMan Collectibles, and we'll see you again next time.